All right, guys, welcome back to the SG Tech The Isolation Series webinar. Thank you to all the participants who are joining us today. Always great to see you guys back on a Wednesday and from yesterday's sharing. So today we have a new topic to talk to you guys about. I just want to give you guys, today we're actually talking about two topics available today. The first one we're going to start off now is managing our employees remotely in the isolation economy. Things to adapt your process to improve communications and collaboration. I'm so lucky today to be joined by some of our member company, Eugene Goh from Talentcred, Shane and Samantha Yen from Growth Beans. They'll be sharing and taking over the screen shortly. So you guys are in for a great treat. Now, after this session, for the first time, our SEC, which is our small enterprise chapter, they're going to give you guys some examples of solutions that are very relevant for the SMEs today to use. It's a solution toolbox. You'll be hearing a few demos of solution that you can actually adopt and use right away just after this session is over. So stay with us all the way till 2:30, bring your lunch, find your food, and join us for the whole 2 hours for this session. As always, let's start off with some safe harbor statement. All this information is provided as a as-is education purpose. Please always seek your own independent legal and accounting advice before acting on any of the advice given here. All efforts have been doing our best to make sure it's accurate. Please also make sure to credit us if you do share our information. SG Tech is the premier trade association for tech industry in Singapore. We are representative of 900 ICT members. Those of you who are not members yet, do drop us an email and join us and be stronger together as a community. So the isolation economy is our effort to support SME and startup in this trying time during COVID-19. So you can go to the isolation.sg website to see our past webinars, articles, and even courses that make sense for you guys. Of course, I always implore everyone, after this webinar is over, please help us help SMEs in Singapore by filling out the post-webinar industry survey. Results will be shared with the relevant government agencies for future policy suggestions. We are stronger together. This post-webinar survey will automatically open once you end this webinar, and we'll send out the link as well. You can see a recording of this webinar and the slides about 2 hours after it's over on isolation.sg or on the SG Tech website. So without further ado, I would like to pass my time over to Eugene from Talentcred to kick off us on this sharing session. So Eugene, please welcome to the stage.
Thanks, Ivan. My name is Eugene from Talentcraft. Just give me a second to get up the presentation. Oops, sorry. I was told I need to share before I can present. Okay, can you guys see the presentation? Yeah, okay, great. So yeah, thanks SG Tech for inviting us to speak today. So we're here to talk about running an effective work from home team. And we're calling this Lessons from the Future because our company Talentcraft has actually already been working from home for a full month, well, 4 weeks as of yesterday. So we thought we would share with you some of what we have learned the hard way from 1 month of working from home. So today's agenda, we will introduce a little bit about Talentcraft and the work we do, just so that you can understand why we have chosen particular solutions or particular ways of doing things. Then we'll talk to you about the challenges we have faced during the month of working from home, and then some productivity lessons or ideas that you guys might want to adopt. Okay, so my company Talentcraft, we are about 2.5 years old. We are a strategy consulting firm, and so our primary trade is HR consulting, helping SMEs and startups with talent attraction, talent retention. In the current crisis period, pandemic period, we are also starting to talk to people about how to work effectively from home, how do you keep people engaged and motivated even during this time. We also have some other products like our chatbots, which help people do screening for candidates for their problem-solving skills, their consulting skill set, and that is something that we are growing. So a part of what we also need to start to do is to market our products. So we have been working from home 100% since the 17th of March 2020. I was in discussions with a friend of mine who is a professor at UCL, and he was already telling me at the time that things are going to get much worse. So we decided that we would try and get ahead of the curve and start working from home, even ahead of when the government asked everybody to do so. Okay, so in terms of the kind of tasks we do, so this will help you understand what are some of the challenges that we've faced, right? So as professional services, our main tasks are categorized into researching and gathering information, running analysis, generating insights from that data, preparing client communication. So this could be decks, this could be emails, and then presenting and discussing outputs with clients. As I mentioned, we also now do quite a bit of digital marketing. So that's another task that we've had to figure out how to do effectively in a work from home setting. I think as many small firms, we used to work in a very fluid manner, right? So it's a relatively small team. We have about 10 people, including interns. So with our new interns, we have now about 12 people. So we used to work like a typical small team, right? So we are all in the same space. The work is very team oriented, lots of discussions, lots of back and forth, different ideas. So we used to have frequent update meetings. And to be honest, our update meeting is a very fancy way of saying I will turn around and talk to people and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? And these were quite ad hoc, right? So we need it, we start talking. And then, of course, we also had lots of fluidity in terms of project timelines, project deadlines. So things would move around quite a lot. So I think this is fairly typical for a small firm. And maybe you guys can teach me how to run where we stopped working from home. But this is how we used to work. So when we switched to work from home, we found that, initially everybody was happy, fine. And then over time, some issues started to crop up. So we wanted to talk about 5 things in particular, right? So 5 lessons from week 4 of work from home. So number 1, the importance of having the basic tools in place. So we talk about hardware, software, live tools, basically things like furniture. We need to talk about how managers need to rethink the way they assign work, right? How it needs to be divided into specific tasks, and we'll talk a bit about what that means. In terms of performance management or team management, it's very important now that you focus on outcome, on output, and not on inputs, right? Not how many people how many hours they're working, not how late they stay in the evenings. Morale and personal connection are even more important than if you were in a team, because what we realize is there are many small micro interactions every day that help to build the team bond, the team spirit, and all of this is much more difficult when you're working from home. And the 5th thing is that effective onboarding of new team members is super critical, right? So all of the things that used to be no problem because they will learn while watching each other is no longer in place. So these are the 5 things that we wanted to focus on. In terms of the tools, I think, Ivan, I attended last week's session where he went through all the basic tools that people need. So for me, if I were to focus, there's tech equipment. Of that, the headset and maybe a proper webcam is the one thing that some people may not already have. In terms of on the right-hand side, the kind of applications and so on, yes, you can use Slack, you use Google Chat. We use Google Chat. We use Monday.com. I'll show you a bit later. And we use Zoom for our calls. We found that call quality is a little bit better. For me, the most important lesson is in the middle because in a way, many of us furnish our homes without expecting to have to do long hours of work from home. Maybe that's just me, but I didn't have a proper office chair. I do have desk space, but it got crowded with all kinds of other stuff. So making sure that your team has a proper work environment is very important. And think of ways that you can help them. So buying a chair or at least buying a proper laptop stand so that they can work comfortably, not have to stare down onto the laptop all the time, because over time your back starts to ache, as I've discovered to my own pain. Second thing is about how management has to change the way they manage, right? And so we think that now when you used to be able to just give people rough instructions. Now we try to be much more concrete, much more specific. So when you are delegating work or giving out work, who are the people working on the task? So it becomes very clear that if two people need to collaborate, they need to then set up time to discuss. It's no longer just like they can sit side by side and talk. What is the specific output expected? Right, so getting very concrete on the outcome so that you don't have to keep going back and forth. It becomes more difficult for people to show you draft and say, is this fine? Is this what you had in mind? Right? Timelines, when is it required? And are there interim check-in meetings that you need to set up in order to discuss, right? So set up meetings immediately. One important point here is also make sure your calendar is up to date. So use one calendar, put all your meetings there and make sure that your team can see your calendar. So don't complain if they then book time in an open slot. What we've also found useful is to try and estimate how much time is required, and so that you can help to load balance across your team. Of course, your team also needs to play ball. So if they are overloaded, they need to tell you when things are going to be difficult for them. We use a tool called monday.com. It is a kind of a task allocation and tracking tool. So it sort of has, these are all the different things we're doing, who is the owner, what is the current status, who is reviewing, when is the deadline. And then we can use this to also make notes, chat, share information back and forth. So we've found this quite useful just for keeping track. And when we do our daily calls, we just look at each person's Monday tasks and use that as the basis for managing the team. Second is to focus on outputs, not on inputs, right? So you need to trust your employees and believe that they can deliver what's required. And so it's not a matter of constantly asking them, are you doing well? Are you doing well? Are you productive? Are you productive? It's trusting that as long as the output is in time and of the right quality, you need to sort of, give them a little bit more leeway. So what you focus on should be a little bit different. So instead of what time they clock in or clock out, focus on, the work that has been done, the output that has been produced. There are some people we've been hearing stories of, expecting their staff to be at their computer to instantly reply to emails or text or instant messenger. And if they're not instantly replying, then they're saying they're slacking. That's probably going to be difficult to maintain. So expect to move towards what they will call asynchronous communication. So more kind of, I send you messages and you reply when you have time. If it's time sensitive, then of course, emphasize that and so people know to prioritize. For us, one of the big challenges for me personally, moving from having meetings as and when we need them to having a much more rigidly planned meeting schedule. One tip here is that think of how long you need for a meeting. So if it's 15 minutes, make it 15 minutes. Don't book 1 hour just for a 10-minute discussion. Also, don't invite people who aren't needed. Otherwise, you end up wasting everybody's time. And don't worry about what your team is doing minute to minute, right? Focus on what they are achieving and what they are able to produce. So don't need to police them moment by moment. We swapped around the order a bit. So lesson 4 here is about effective onboarding of new hires. Of course, some of you will be taking on interns. We ourselves have a new batch of interns who will be coming in May. So we are going to do a separate webinar together with SG Tech on how to onboard contactlessly for new joiners and interns. But it needs to be a much more deliberate process. For us, the key elements are helping people to understand the company info background, but also business update. Obviously, brief them on the tools, the processes, the expectations. Get them the information they need on HR policies, finance policies, expense, any other things that your company needs. And we actually think the team culture and way of working is quite important as well. Most companies won't have this very well codified, but that is one of the things that it's worth considering if you're going to be onboarding quite large numbers of people. Some people say this is going to last 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. It might become a long-term feature. So having tools in place to make the onboarding process simpler is, I think, something that we would recommend. I think one of the presenters in the second session, Arc Labs, will talk a little bit about how they can help with onboarding processes. So I will talk very briefly about how morale and personal connections are more important. Shane, of course, will go a lot more into detail on this whole idea of your team's welfare. But there are things we do in real life that can also be done virtually. So we started doing weekly team lunch. The first time round, we actually bought everybody Deliveroo vouchers, so they could at least order food, and we had the meal together. You can try virtual exercise sessions. We keep threatening the team that we're going to do Zumba over Zoom, but so far we haven't tried it yet. And then there are also different kinds of productivity tools that you can use. So this is a picture of us having a team lunch. So honestly, we had one yesterday where not everybody was eating, but just the fact that it was like a no agenda chat, I personally found it quite nice. It was nice to sort of be a little bit more relaxed. If it's not lunch, then maybe it's like the Friday beer equivalent, where you guys will do late on a Friday, not too late, let's say 4 to 5, have a session where people just sit around and relax in your team, or if it's a small company, the whole company, and help to build that little bit of a relationship and warmth. We found that quite useful. We are experimenting with team tools to help maintain morale. So this is a tool called Sales Screen. It's also part of the SG Tech toolkit that is available on their website. So we are experimenting with this. So this is just a bit of a dummy data. But for example, you can turn your sales targets into competitions, and then you can see how different people are performing. And this is a way of sort of creating a little bit of like excitement, competition, just so that people can at least still connect with other people. There's also ways to celebrate success. So if you close a sale or if you hit a target, all of these things can be highlighted. So I think there's a bunch of tools that can help with all of that. So to summarize, I think running out of time here. So 5 actions. If you say, okay, that was all interesting, what do I do now? Number 1, create a checklist for your team and ensure that they have what they need, right? And think of ways to help them solve problems. Number 2, you might need to talk to your management team and help them understand what kind of changes they will need to make in how they are going to work and manage their team, right? So different people might do things differently if you have a large team. So how do you get some consistency and make sure that everybody is following the right procedures? Number 3, in terms of not micromanaging, but agreeing more high-level key targets so that your team can translate them into their own tasks and manage them in their own way. Number 4, start building your own onboarding pack so that the next few, the interns or any new hires or any new joiners will have a smooth onboarding process. And identify, there are lots of ideas now. I see so many posts on Facebook, on LinkedIn about what people are doing with their teams. Put in place some quick win team morale boosters, and don't just sort of assume that everybody will be fine, because different people will respond differently to this current situation. So I think we will take questions at the end of this 1-hour session. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. I'm going to hand over to Shane to talk about the taking care of your team.
Thank you, Eugene. Let me also work on sharing my slides. Can everyone see my slides?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So thank you, Eugene, for sharing that. I think there was some tips there that would also overlap over here in my session on supporting employee well-being, keeping the human connection amidst physical isolation. So one of the key things really here, it's about the human aspect. But before I begin, maybe just a bit of introduction of myself. First, I'm Shane, co-founder of Growth Beans. Shamantha will be joining us later on at the panelists. I am also a co-opted member of SG Tech, the Singapore Enterprise Chapter Exco, and the IHRP, which is the Institute of Human Resource Practitioners COVID-19 Task Force Group. Growth Beans, basically, is a social enterprise that focuses on the well-being, inclusivity, and employability of individuals by deepening their self and other awareness in a psychological safe space within the community, like your organization, to drive growth. So in doing all of this, we can actually see different areas of impact, some of which would be increasing employee engagement, better collaboration and team spirit, enhanced leadership skills, lower turnover rates, and so on. So some services that we offer would be strategic HR, third-party services, where we come in wearing the hat of a HR for you, like an employee, to deliver the goals that you want. We have coaching and team building programs, sharing circle services, soft skills workshops, and so on. But for today's session, the outcome that we would like to achieve for you is for you to walk away with ready tools that you can start implementing. So you will have like the step-by-step guide and things that you can already start utilizing when you arrange your team meetings next week. We focus on psychological safety because if you've seen from Google, psychological safety is very important for effective teams, but really it's also about the growth and the well-being of individuals, because when you create a safe space and you make people feel that it's okay to be themselves, there's no judgment and it's okay to share, you will see that there's more connectedness, more expansion of perspectives, and people are also willing to allow themselves to be vulnerable, and this would help a lot in collaboration, creativity, focus, motivation when they see that their well-being is taken care of. So first up, let us talk about like the well-being and what it's made up of. So there are 6 elements of well-being. It's financial, physical, intellectual, social, emotional, and psychological. I'm going to show you a few pictures, and I'd like to see how you connect to them, or if you know of people who actually connect to them. So is this you, where your home working environment and the distractions are affecting and impacting how and when you work as an maybe overwhelmed parent, or if you're a caregiver to an elderly, or even a pet owner? Is it also tougher for you to separate work time and personal or rest time? Because what we hear on the ground when we reach out to the different communities that we support and even like companies, we hear that they are actually they feel busier because now there is no separation between work and rest, because you don't leave the office, you just step away from your desk, and that ties to discipline as well. And then also some that the balance between me time and social connection, that's an issue. Some people have said that, you know, even with being in the same home with like your family, they don't spend enough time with their family. Some are also saying that they're getting tired of looking at like their family faces alone. They are wanting to actually see new faces out there. So are these descriptions of what you're experiencing today, especially if you are already 1 week or more than 1 week into work from home? So these are common challenges that we already hear from the ground. And I think a number of us who are on this call would also face frequent web calls or meetings, because now it's so easy to set up meetings. You don't have to travel to someone's office. It's just with one click of the button, you get into a meeting straight away. And that could, number one, either take away time from real work, making us feel unproductive, or it could make us feel even busier and feel overwhelmed. But most certainly, all of these challenges here does contribute to that lack of social interaction, anxiety, and other negative emotions which are bad for us in the long term, which can create health problems and other things which as a company or business owners you want to be mindful of. So with the 6 elements of well-being, then we can see that the social, emotional, and psychological aspects are even more important to look at, because these are the ones that are impacted. Because it can, the different challenges you saw earlier on can link to loss of control, confidence, the different emotions like stress, anxiety, overwhelm, and even boredom with the disconnectedness and the lack of human touch. So when your well-being is impacted, your productivity and morale will definitely be affected. So what is our role as a business owners or leaders in our own companies? It is really about needing to look at our individuals as fellow human beings, understand what their needs are, connecting with them so that they can work together better as a team in order to achieve our business purpose, aims, and objectives. And this is even more important in these challenging times. But first of all, we as a leader need to have that human touch. So what we're going to share with you is 6 tips to support your team. It's going to be quite a bit of information here, so please bear with me. I will try to cover this in the next 10 minutes or so. So number 1 is the focus on goals and outcome. I think you have heard earlier on from Eugene what are some of these things that can be done. Really, in a coaching conversation recently, an individual was sharing with his coach that he was facing a lot of undue stress. So between him and his boss, they actually set up a time to catch up, a fixed time on a daily basis. But what happened was the boss was always calling him whenever something came to his mind. What is it? How does the individual perceive it then? Is that he feels that the boss was just trying to ensure he was working. And this became very disruptive to his work. So again, riding on what Eugene was saying, right, is this is the aspect that we need to be very mindful of. Let us focus on the clear outcomes that we want the employees to have, and we let us empower and trust them to take it forward. Which goes on to tip number 2. We know that it's always very easy for us to think that everyone should be working at the same time. When there's a work office environment, it's easy. But when we are staying at home now, different employees have different challenges. Like with kids, we know that toddlers and home-based learning can really take time away from work. So do allow your employees the flexibility to arrange or reorganize their working hours if needed to accommodate their schedule at the point when they're the most productive, because then you can ensure that they will have productive outcomes and their deliverables. And of course, have them set and update their status to indicate when they are away, so that they know, your other employees know when to approach them. Of course, all of this needs to be discussed within your team. Some other companies has also encouraged their team to review and redistribute their workload in this time so that their team can really support one another. In terms of tip number 3, one of the things that we cannot emphasize enough is really to over-communicate. But when we talk about over-communicate, it's not the same as what we shared in the first example of the constant calling to check in on work or share ideas, but it's to really look at it from to communicate really out of care and concern by sharing like the business strategy, direction, and focus, because at this point in time, maybe not all projects are important, and that can help employees to prioritize their work. When they are more informed, it can help them to reduce anxiety and uncertainty. And in terms of checklists that they can use, you can also offer them some of these checklists. So we have created this for you, which you can download later on for your employees. So distribute this to them and remind them like, hey, because you are a priority, these are some things that we encourage you to do. And for your managers as well, or leaders, these are things that you can remember to do. How exactly do you over communicate? One is if the leader can share an email like that first. I mean, email is just one of the mediums where you actually talk about like your focus, business focus, and what is your top priority. Psychologically, when employees know that they are your top priority and you care for them, you already help to bridge the first level of human connection and make them feel that they are important, and that helps with morale and well-being. Then the next in line on the different managers is to continuously use this to keep checking in with your employees, which means what they can do is to call their employees like on a one-on-one basis to really understand how they're coping, be aware of the challenges they have, and to provide like the support accordingly. So if your managers have like the empathy skills to actively listen to their team's needs, this is great. If not, really utilize this time now to help your managers also develop this skill set, because there are different workshops out there that they can tap on during this downtime. Otherwise, it's really very important to get them to ask these 3 questions to their team. Number 1, what has it been like working from home for them? Number 2, what are the challenges faced? And number 3, is there anything that they can support them with that will help them to juggle their home situation and their work deliverables? So number 3 is an example of what a coaching question is like, that will empower the employees to come up with their own strategy and action steps that will work for them. So let us move on to tip number 4. We talked earlier on, and based on our own interactions with different people, really it boils down to individual discipline as well in terms of structure. And this is even more difficult when you are not in an office where the different people around you can help to nudge you towards a certain routine on when you need to take breaks, when you go into calls, and so on. So do provide the structure. And for those of us who have like lots of meetings and calls to go to, here are some tips that you can take. Number 1, obtain the objectives of the call and prioritize important calls. If there are calls that are not so important today or urgent, maybe can they be actually brought to another day? Alternatively, is to allow employees to make that decision on can they hold calls only at a certain time slot in the day, whether it's the morning or in the afternoon, so that they can have other times in the day set aside to work on other things that will prevent them from working through the night or the weekends. So we know that there are some companies in the banking sector who actually encourage their staff to hold the calls in the evening. so that they can get, the staff can get all the HBL and all the children needs out of the way first before they can focus on the calls in the evening. And if all of that is not possible and you really need to have your back-to-back calls, then one suggestion is to set your meetings to like 15 minutes duration, and this will leave you time, like 10 minutes, to pause and decompress before you go to your next meeting. And this will help you prevent you from feeling overwhelmed and gives your brain time to rest. Another way to introduce daily rituals for your employees is like what Eugene mentioned earlier on, right? You can introduce your online lunch sessions. If you have the budget, and you can also order lunch and send it to all their houses, or you can just get everyone to get their own lunch and then you sit together and have conversations. One of the things that can come up for well-being that can affect them is also like the food type, right? So you can start a company hashtag WFH lunch, where employees share what they're having for lunch with one another. This can nudge them to actually eat a little bit more healthily. But more importantly, these two tips can remind people to take a break and actually have their lunch. So virtual happy hours or coffee breaks can also be set in place in time, in the schedule, for people to pause and actually to connect. So you can also run an online fitness class by engaging a fitness instructor to gather all your employees in Zoom to, let's say, over lunch or to mark the end of the day, because this is where you actually tell people this is time to step away from your desk. So if you see this picture at the bottom here, this was what we actually did with our community. We had 35 participants yesterday coming in for an online Zumba session. And the good thing about these things is that if you are a family-oriented culture, you can also invite them to bring their family in to join, and you get to see their families as well. So if you're interested in doing this or trying this out for your employees, we do have like a Tuesday sessions which you can join in. You can get your employees to join in as well at 6:15 p.m. every week. So how does a software development company does this? This is an example I'm sharing. What they did is, because they understand that employees are all motivated by learning, they're all interested to grow and to keep learning things. What they did is to organize, or what they're doing right now is to organize a weekly lunch and learn session for their employees, where they get their employees to take turns to share a topic or like experience with one another. That is also tied to their own personal goals and development plans, so that they can all learn something new every week. It's also a chance for leaders to communicate the business updates, for employees to share any concerns or work progress. Now, if there's something that you really want to implement, then a lunch and learn is in this manner is perfect and is very effective to help to connect people together, keep everyone motivated, and you can start to see the change in behavior over time for increased collaboration and cohesiveness. Tip number 5 is about providing formal support. Like if we see in China, what do we notice is that in this period of time, during their lockdown, there was actually an increase in divorce rates. So it shows that everyone in different ways will have like their own personal challenges. It could be stress over financials, marital, family tensions. So there's a need for like the emotional support. So what can we do as employers is really to provide them with access to information on where they can go to get the emotional support. So there are some counseling hotlines available for free, like Community Psychology Hub or National Care hotlines, that you can send this information to them. Or if you like, you can also get your own employee assistance program provider for your employees. So a global pharmaceutical company actually they have an employee assistance program for all their employees globally. And this EAP provider also provides webinars that their people can subscribe to, so that they can learn more tips on how to support themselves and to also have more high levels of well-being. This EAP provider also offers financial and legal counseling options for them. Now, if let's say emotional support is not required, but rather you have staff who's feeling stuck, they need a different form of self-care, there's certain blind spots that's getting in the way of them to move forward, then maybe providing access to coaching programs might be useful for them to challenge their beliefs or mindsets about this new way of working. So providing like individual coaching or group coaching can help them to brainstorm like new ways of overcoming challenges to create action steps to achieve their goals, both in their work, in their life and work. So for group coaching is especially useful also if you want to look at deepening the connections in your company, because when people start to share more and they start to recognize like the different blind spots that each other have, you will start to see a more cohesive team forming from there. Again, if you want to, we do have like free resource available here on anyone who wants to utilize like the free individual coaching or group coaching to see how this will benefit your company, and that's in the free resource. Then in this isolation time, then you really need to help to facilitate connections. So one, if you want to set up to do virtual team building activities, you can set up social committee to arrange and organize that. I'll share an example of a team building activity you can run later on. And this social committee can also organize fun challenge for people so that people feel like there's some form of excitement, and they can still keep connected via your current mediums of communication, like your WhatsApp, for example. Like you can create an inspiring quote challenge where colleagues can take pictures in their day and put in inspiring quotes. This is also very useful to help to raise the level of positivity and have some fun in that process. Now, one very powerful thing that you can do is to kickstart a positive growth circle within your company. If you have a very large company, then you can have multiple of these growth circles. What these growth circles aim to do is to get people to come together. They can share their own personal experiences, personal stories, and tips with each other. They can share challenges and brainstorm how to overcome that. So what it can do for the company is it really utilizes the safe space, and it can facilitate much deeper connections beyond just fun and laughter. And when people start to really see like the challenges that each person is facing, that's where you have like the real human connection. Now, if you're not sure what a safe space feels like and how to go about doing that, you can join the free Growth Beans sharing community to meet new people as well. That's run on a fortnightly basis. Again, free resources available and for you. So how does a telecommunication company does that? They do a daily stand-up call where their leaders take turns to share about what the company is doing, share like COVID-related updates to their employees for the certainty and assurance. They also have like their own social committee that organizes the virtual games and coffee sessions. So what this committee does is they will go and research for like different kind of activities that they can do virtually for their staff. So over here, as promised, is a online multiplayer jigsaw puzzle that you can utilize. So what you could do is to break up your company into different teams, get them to choose the same picture, and they can compete, across teams to see who can complete the puzzle in the fastest time possible. You can also see how the team works together. So you can also look at like teamwork as a learning outcome in this process. So all in all, we shared with you 6 tips to support your team. And because over here, we really want to be able to support like SMEs and any other companies out there going through this difficult period. These are like the free resources for you. You can download by scanning this QR code, the Wellbeing Resource Package. Whether to tap on like that webinar, the free webinar for your employees, how to manage their emotions, utilize the individual group coaching. The checklists are also here for you to use. There are 3 team building activities for you and all the stuff over here. So if you have any questions, do let us know. And any point in time, if you find that, hey, there's a certain strategy you have utilized in your company, do share with us in the FAQ so that we can collate this and share back with you from SG Tech. Ivan, over to you.
Hey guys, thank you so much. Thank you much, Shane and Eugene. So to our audience members, maybe you can ask us some in the Q&A section. Do feel free to ask us questions along the way. All right. Shane, can I ask you to help me just stop sharing for us? Thank you very much. Perfect. Okay, here we go. So waiting for our audience to answer some questions, but maybe, to kick off the discussion between Eugene and Shane. So yeah, what is the greatest new thing you guys been facing since moving to work from home right now? Maybe Eugene first. Yeah, what's the biggest challenge you've been seeing so far? For me, everybody knows this. I keep eating poke, man.
I think my biggest problem is just not having a proper chair. But I've just been told it will be delivered tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
I'm sitting on like cushions and yeah.
Oh, okay. How about Shane and Samantha? Yeah. Your house looks very well stocked, so it should be okay.
I think for me, it's because I always try to run usually,
Mm-hmm.
and also at the gym downstairs. So now we've really just worked from home, and I think with encouragement to not go out, I have to change the way I vent my inner frustrations, if any at all, from a work day. So then it's finding different kinds of exercise to be doing at home and finding a time to be doing that.
Okay.
And for me, it's because I have a 5-month-old kid, so that's about
Oh my.
managing between like going to attend to the kids' needs or like being at work.
I can imagine. Okay, we have the first question. How do we measure productivity of our employees when they work from home? Maybe since Shane, you're unmuted. Yeah, like a lot of SME owners are concerned with productivity, right? Yeah, how do we now measure productivity? Since you guys share about check-in and everything else.
I think I think it's very important that when your company has a certain goal, you actually break it down into like what you would want to see as outcomes for your employees. So like what Eugene shared also in his own sharing, it's looking at the outcomes that your employees are actually finishing and delivering the outcomes by the set time, because you can't really, even if they're in the office, you can't really measure productivity in that way too. So the only way is to make sure that they can finish it in the time that you've set.
Okay, and Eugene, the same thing.
I would agree. I mean, a question comes back is probably, how did you used to measure productivity in the office? Most of us don't really, right? So suddenly when you're working from home, you're suddenly much more conscious of it. So I think for my point is, there are certain things that need to get done. As long as the things are done and within a reasonable time frame, then that should be fine. And I guess for now it's kind of still in a short-term crisis mode. So that's probably how most companies will be running at the moment, making sure that the things that need to get done are done, and then finding the right solutions for that.
Understandable. Thank you. We have a next question, but I want to take this part first. The first part is this. If you're a smaller company, like 4 or 5 people, SMEs, how do you create a community if, you know what I mean? Like, for example, let's say the 4 of us are in the same company, right? It's just 4 of us, yeah? So after a while, also can get tired of seeing each other and share our food. So yeah, how will you try to create this social thing so that you feel at least you're part of a bigger community, like a co-working space? Maybe Eugene first? Yeah.
Oh yeah, actually, so I think if your team is too small, then consider joining up with other companies with similar profiles. So like, for example, our team is fairly young, so we can work with other consulting firms or other agencies that have very similar teams to at least have a bit of cross-fertilization. So you don't feel like you're always talking to the same people. Some of the tools that we shared earlier, like to create a little bit of more social, if it's a larger group, still able to connect by joining into competitions. Actually, I like the multiplayer jigsaw puzzle that Shane showed. So I'm going to Google it and make my team do jigsaw puzzles.
Okay, so some game, some form of thing, yeah. Samantha, any idea? Like, how can you be, then maybe for Samantha, like, how can you find other companies to be a bigger part of the community with?
Actually, for us, we run different sharing circles, like was shared earlier by Shane, a growth bin sharing circle. We do it for youth, we do it for adults, and right now we're also looking at just fusing them all together so that really everyone can and anyone can learn from one another. And in these sharing circles, it's really where we have like facilitated conversations about different topics. So then, because usually on a day-to-day basis, when you're really so focused on work, it's hard to think of what else can we talk about. So this is where we try to shift our frame of minds to be thinking about more things beyond just work-related stuff and encourage more sharing and expanding perspective that way, and looking also at the emotional side of things. But of course, we always encourage everyone to just share whatever they're comfortable with. And it's really great also for us as business leaders to also be the first to be vulnerable, because you set the tone and context for everyone else in your company. So other ways of building a community then, of course, what has already been shared is not just that discussion, it's actually finding new ways of connecting. That's where like the Zumba online, or even through games, that's actually seeing people interact in different ways than we usually do.
So if I write on, right? So in terms of looking for other people or companies, we don't exactly have to do that because the community are made up of people from different companies already.
Okay, understandable. And how do you get your employees who traditionally don't share a lot to share more?
We find that the breakout sessions in Zoom function is fantastic.
Okay.
Because we need to be mindful that you have people who are extroverted and introverted. So when people
Exactly.
are more introverted, they want to share more in like smaller groups. So that also creates the safety net, right? The safe spaces for people to talk. And you find that people do want to share, but it's more of like the size of the group makes a difference.
Understand. Okay, we have a next question. How do you manage young and old? This is going to be a big thing, right? Like, you know, in my own organization, my oldest colleagues are about 62 and my youngest is say around my age is about 30, 35. How do you manage this? You know, already in office, there's already an IT gap now, but now even more so. Any ideas about how to manage this? Eugene, maybe you want to chime in first?
Yeah, I think practically it's going to be very challenging, and it's particularly challenging if like a small team are all very diverse.
Mm,
The way we think about it is like you would use the same kind of approach that you would normally do to team engagement and team retention in your company, right? And think about what matters to people and working on the sort of the high impact things. So some differences matter and some differences don't matter, right? So trying to find things that your as a group you guys care most about, and then focusing on those bigger things, right? So focusing on what is similar, at the same time addressing the fact that some people are more kind of extroverted and therefore need certain outlets to talk to other people. Some people are perfectly happy by themselves. I think data, so HR analytics now gives us insight into things like what motivates people at work, what their personalities are like. If you've not used those tools before, they can actually help you understand your team and help your team understand themselves also, right? Because a lot of time you don't actually sit down and say, what makes me get up and go to work apart from salary, right? Is it the fact that we work together in teams? Is it the fact that we do challenging stuff? And then sometimes some of these things you can replicate in work from home. Some of these things you will need to find almost go and artificially create so that people still feel that they are getting what they need. So there's a bit of analytics and then translating into kind of initiatives and strategy.
understandable. Okay. Yes. Next question here. Shane and Samantha, I think this would be great. How do you reach out to your employees who are feeling a bit more negative and sad, but they're very shy to speak out? You know, in office it's so much easier, right? But I think a lot of people are feeling cabin fever right now. How do you reach out to them? Especially if you are SME owner.
Yeah, I think this is where like the rapport building is very important, right? We actually shared one of the tips is for you to reach out to your individual employees, like one-on-one. It can really make a difference when you actually just pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, how are things? How are you feeling? When people speak, you can actually get a sensing of how they sound. Then you might already know that maybe there's something bothering them, and you can actually ask them, how are you? Are you feeling okay?
I think if I just write on here as well, when we were trying to reach out to people who are shy to speak up, then it's very important for us to also be mindful of how much time we are speaking, because as long as we're speaking, we're not giving them the time and space to actually speak. So sometimes silence over the phone, or even if it's through a video call, it's perfect because they will eventually open up after a while. The other way then is if you are not comfortable yourself as being the one to reach out to them, identify the people whom they are close with and get them to be the one to reach out. So that's where we form the support system within the company.
Yeah. Actually, one comment there is that it's quite important to take pulse checks with your team. So not as a team level, right, how people are doing. So I saw that some of the Singapore HR tech companies like Engage Rocket have now a free offer, which we ourselves have signed up for, to get a feel for whether people are happy and what they are unhappy or happy about, right? And data is important. So getting a pulse check from across the team, I think is more important than it used to be. So we didn't used to do engagement surveys, but I think we're going to start because it's much more difficult to assess when you don't see them day to day.
I have just one more final question. Thank you guys. One more final question today. So when do you use WhatsApp chat messages? When do you use video calling? And when you take out a phone call and call? Yes, like, you know what I mean? Like there's so many communication channel now. So what would your recommendation for video calling like this? And what would your recommendation for a chat application like WhatsApp?
I think for us, we try to primarily use video calls. So it's also a little bit more structured because WhatsApp, I think it was your discussion last week, right? That
Yes.
it's actually kind of a personal number. So we try to use Google Hangouts with rooms so that everybody can see the messages. And so call or WhatsApp is typically for them quite urgent things where I'm afraid this is my best way to contact you and I need you immediately. Other than that, I think we will try and set up Zoom as a preferred means.
Yeah, I think we try not to invade the employees' even personal space now more, because now you're actually zooming in from their home. It's such an invasion of the separation of home.
Which is why I recommend everybody do virtual background so that they don't see what your actual home looks like.
Oh, I thought that was real. Okay, got it. I really thought it was real. So I was thinking why you have no chat. Okay, Shane and Samantha, any final thoughts on this? Yeah.
I guess where it comes to things which really requires you engaging on a deeper level, like let's say someone is really feeling negative or sad, two things. The first thing is really to understand your staff. If like they are really not comfortable in having be seen in a video, then really a call is great, because when you are on a call, you can actually hear the tones of voice and the choices of words, and you can really feel their emotional state. But if let's say if they're okay with video, then when you actually see each other face to face, that allows you to pick up on certain nuances in their behaviors. Then I guess in terms of WhatsApp, usually it's if you're just sharing something and if you want to share to the masses or the bigger community, that's perfectly fine. But I guess Zoom is great when you really want to understand how people are feeling about certain things that are being said. So for example, if it's a team meeting and you're talking about a particular direction and some people look confused, that actually feedback in terms of how they are reacting and their emotional expression, it is great for you to know when you have to step in and clarify.
Got it. All right. Thank you so much, Shane, Samantha, and Eugene. I think this is a great session. Of course, guys, we'll be available all of this online for you guys. So this will be something else next. So taking on right now, I'll be happy to say that we're going to take a quick 4 or 5 minutes toilet break before we go into the next part of today's session. The next part of today's session is led by our SG Tech SEC chapter. They'll be talking about the solution and giving you guys some real life software that you can actually apply for and use right off the bat to be able to adopt to work from home. So that will be led by our SEC chapter. Let's take a quick break and we'll begin and resume at about 1:30. Once again, thank you, Shane. Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Eugene. Everyone else, please continue tuning in and see you guys shortly.